TCU beats Baylor. The Frogs still have something to play for, or at least they have the postseason to play for against Oklahoma this Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. So that's coming up this week. TCU got a new commit from the JUCO ranks, and Gary Patterson, he wants to get back into coaching. That's what he told Matt Mosley. We'll talk about all that and more next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. TCU, they get a victory over Baylor in the Bluebonnet Battle. Subscribe to the Locked On Horned Frogs YouTube channel. Also subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Thank you for doing that. Sorry for my absence the last couple of days. I was on our annual family camping trip and did not have reliable internet or Wi-Fi, and so it just wasn't really worth it to record anything. Post-game show will be back this coming Friday following the game against Oklahoma, and we'll have plenty of coverage this week leading up to the game against the Sooners. TCU gets a victory, though, 42-17 over Baylor in their rivalry game. They win that trophy that we made fun of all week in the Bluebonnet Battle, but really good game by the Frogs. I mean, there were still some things, and I'll talk about some of the negatives in this segment. The red zone offense struggled at times. They had turnovers, had some penalties that weren't ideal. But at the end of the day, I mean, they won this game going away. Baylor's not a good football team. That was made clear. I mean, we knew that going into it. It was made abundantly clear in this game in Fort Worth. I don't think David Randall will be back. I don't have sources saying that information, but it just feels like the writing's on the wall for him. But TCU has also really struggled this year. I mean, they're 2 games under 500 going into that football game. So obviously it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that they would lose that or not play well and end up in a dogfight with a Baylor team that has had a rough season. And, I mean, there were times where that was the case. You know, they turned the ball over. Amani Bailey has a fumble on the offense's open possession after the defense gets a stop. Baylor goes down and scores. They go up 7-0. They kept it a one-possession game throughout the first half and into the second half. But then TCU defense was able to get off the field on 4th down. Offense started to pick it up and get it done, and the Frogs end up winning. A couple guys I wanted to talk about that really impressed me. I was super happy for Jared Wiley, the Frogs tight end, who it was his last game in the Carter. He transferred over from Texas a few years back, and he had an enormous day. 7 catches, 178 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And the biggest one was that 81-yard touchdown catch where he just ran down the seam, and for whatever reason, coverage bust, he was wide open. Hoover finds him around midfield, and he takes it to the house. Savion Williams had a nice block that, you know, got that last defender out of the way. But Jared's a guy that he's had a solid year overall. We were talking in the offseason about how he appeared to be someone that was going to take a huge step forward this year as a receiver, because last year he was really active in the run game, blocking. He was a popular 3rd down target for Max Duggan, a popular red zone target for Max Duggan. But I felt like this was the season where he could put it all together and be a complete tight end. And his numbers on the year are really solid. 39 catches, 481 yards, 6 touchdowns. And it was really helped by that 180-yard game that he had against Baylor. I still would have loved to have seen him get more targets. That big frame at 6'7", he sometimes trips over his own feet when he's moving around out there, but ultimately moves really well, is able to break tackles, physical running the ball. I feel like Jared Wiley has a bright future ahead of him. I think he's going to be at least somebody that gets an NFL camp invite. I feel like he's going to get drafted and will have a chance to make a roster and have a good career at the next level because the measurables are there, and he's quick on his feet. He's got a good catch radius. It makes tough contested catches, does all the things you want the modern tight end to do. And I was happy that he got to go out on senior day and then get a victory for all those guys. And you know, there's a lot of them. I won't list all the names, but Mark Perry, Jared Wiley, Brandon Coleman, potentially Andrew Coker. I know he walked, even though he does have some extra eligibility. John Lands. These players this year has not been what we thought. It's been disappointing in a lot of ways, but they are still part of TCU history. I mean, they they led this program to a place where they had never gotten to before, in a place where, honestly, in the last few years of the Gary Patterson era, I was wondering, man, was 2014 like the one opportunity this team had to get to the mountaintop? And they still didn't get to the mountaintop. We all know the story with the loss against Georgia, but they won a playoff game. They came a few plays away from winning a Big 12 title and going 13-0 in the regular season. If you add the Big 12 title game to that, they ran the table in the regular season and went 12-0. They did just incredible things and made a 180 from the previous 2 or 3 seasons that they had been there before, and left the program in a better place than they found it. And some of those guys are transfers. They were only here for a couple of years, but still the impact is really immeasurable. So I appreciate those guys. I'm glad that Jared Wiley had a huge day catching the ball. And I mean, I feel like he's one of those players that we might look up in 4 or 5 years and think, man, why did we not give him more opportunities to catch the football? But he did improve this year and became more active in this offense. And there were obviously a lot of reasons why it didn't go exactly how we thought or how we wanted to. But that and the Colorado game were kind of the 2 shining examples of what a, engaged, like fully loaded, ready to go Jared Wiley could look like in the receiving game. And it was special to see him do that on his last game in the field there in Fort Worth. And I really like what Josh Hoover did as well. His stat line was great. I'll pull it up here. 24-29, 412 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, didn't turn the ball over, made big-time throws. I talked about that 81-yard touchdown pass to Jared, which, I mean, vertical passing game, like it wasn't – he didn't throw it 60 yards on the football field, but it was a coverage bust. He found his man. They got a big play. And he also hit Savion on a deep go route. It was 1-for-1, and that feels like the first – like Jared or Josh has had some trouble connecting on those plays. And so that felt like a big moment. I think it was 2nd and 12. They were backed up, in the shadow of their own end zone, and he's able to hit Savion over the top. Had a few opportunities in that Tech game to connect with him and just couldn't do it. So that was nice to see. It looks like he's much more decisive. We even saw him use his legs a little bit and run for a touchdown. And I don't expect Josh to do that week in and week out. But I think that there's multiple reasons why this team has not been able to run the football. And the main one is that their O-line is just not very good at run blocking. And so that's the biggest issue. And there's no real way around that. They're trying to find creative ways to mitigate, the damage from that. But short yardage and goal line situations are going to be an uphill battle. But one thing that Josh can do to help the numbers, because teams are just in these 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, or 1st and goal, whatever it is, situations where you need positive yardage, and pretty much everybody in the stadium knows you're going to run the ball. Everyone's selling out for Imani Bailey. And so I know Josh Hoover's he's not Mike Vick, right? And he might not even be Chandler Morris with his ability to move with his legs, but he's not a statue back there. And so if he could just occasionally, and maybe what he did on Saturday will help unlock this a little bit and loosen things up some, pull that ball, and hopefully we get 2 more games. It might just be 1, but pull the ball out of the mesh point and take it himself, then I think that could do some big things for that offense. And I don't know how much of that too is, I mean, Chandler's back now, but they've been pretty limited with the quarterback depth chart. And so I know that's probably taken out a lot of the designed run game for the quarterback. But that's a huge part of Kendall's offense. I mean, it wasn't just something that he did with KJ Jefferson because KJ was big and built like a linebacker and could do those things. Everywhere he's been, he's used the quarterback in the run game to a certain extent. And so I feel like it would really help things moving forward. I think Josh has set up the coaching staff with a very big decision in the offseason. He's played well. His numbers are pretty identical to Chandler Morris. I saw somebody having an exchange with Steven Johnson from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on Twitter today, and they sort of screenshotted like we're basically at the same amount of games between Chandler and Josh at this point, and Chandler's numbers are slightly better. But Steven brought up that you have to consider the competition level, right? And I think especially the last few weeks, starting with the Tech game, the K-State game was such a disaster. But Tech, Texas, and now Baylor, and BYU was a great performance by him as well. But those three, the last 3 games, it feels like he's getting better each week. It feels like he's getting more comfortable. He's understanding what he needs to do. Really, in the second half of that Texas game and into this Baylor game, he protected the ball well after that really bad interception right before halftime. So I like a lot of the things that Josh has done. He's got a good arm. I think he fits this offense well. At the same time, he's not lighting the world on fire. And so I feel like you have to bring in somebody who's experienced in the portal, in the transfer portal this offseason, who's going to be able to compete or at least just, push him a little bit in camp. And we saw this past offseason with Chandler. I don't think the coaching staff was telling quarterbacks like it's his job, but it seemed implied just based on a lot of decisions that were made that it was his job to lose. And maybe that had some people going, I don't know if I want to go there, right? And compete if it's not going to be a real actual competition. And so bring somebody in, make it a real competition that starts in the spring if possible, and get after it and see who wins. Now, I also think if Josh is able to beat Oklahoma and maybe win a bowl game or have a good performance in those two games or have a really good performance against OU and, a game that maybe you lose the last minute, then that gives you a lot of confidence going into next season. And I still feel like you need to bring someone in, but maybe there's not nearly as much pressure going into the offseason and trying to find, a starting level caliber quarterback. But Hoss Haney, I'm excited about him. I think he's going to be a great player. I just don't see him being ready to start as a true freshman. I mean, that's a really hard ask for anybody. And so I think that's an unfair thing to just expect him to do that coming in cold, to a new environment, a new system in college football in general. So we'll see how all that plays out. But I like what I'm seeing from Josh, and I think this is another chance this weekend, and hopefully he'll get those bowl practices. They can find a way to win, to just show his skill set and show that he's getting more confidence, and the team really seems to respond to him well. And so that's been a bright spot over these last few games, and especially in the victory. When we come back, some final thoughts about this game, and then TCU football landed a commit over the weekend, so we'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. We're going to talk recruiting in a moment. And it's a great segue because our recruiting segments are brought to you by LinkedIn. Why is that? Well, because LinkedIn is the best in the game when it comes to talent acquisition for your company or your business. If you were in the business of hiring people or trying to find out, who the best person is to take the job at the business you own or just the business you work at, LinkedIn Jobs is the way to go. LinkedIn is a fantastic database because everybody knows about LinkedIn. It's the number one name when it comes to finding work. So the people that are there, they're there to find work. You can cast a wide net. You can get a large, expansive database of people that you can reach. And then they'll put in their resumes, applications, all those things. And you can start looking through, and they have simple screening questions and other tools that make it really easy to narrow down that focus so you're not wasting a lot of time. And you got to find the right person, the right culture fit, the right qualifications. LinkedIn makes it easy for you. LinkedIn Jobs. Go to linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Let me pull up the overlay here on YouTube. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. That's the best part. If it ain't free, it ain't me. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Number one job site. They're ranked number one in small businesses in finding talent. Talent acquisition is the name of the game. Don't do it halfway. Use LinkedIn today. LinkedIn, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. We have a really cool thing that we've been launching. It started last week. We have a national channel now that features our Locked On shows. So if you love the Locked On Network, whether it's Locked On Horned Frogs, if you've dipped into Locked On Mavs, Locked On Rangers, whatever the case might be, now there is one place where you can watch all these shows. Locked On has launched its first ever national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts, and Locked On plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Again, that's Locked On Sports Today. subscribe there today. So yeah, I thought the defense played well against Baylor. This is a Baylor team that struggled. I feel like Blake Shapen's actually shown a lot of toughness and tenacity. He was injured in this ball game late in the game. This season has shown some improvement, but the skill positions they just have no explosiveness at all. And overall, TCU did a solid job. Dominic Richardson led the rushing attack with 66 yards on 17 carries. Drake Dabney had 4 receptions for 77 yards. Defense caught some breaks. Monterey Baldwin had a horrible drop on what would have been a walk-in touchdown. I think Baylor ended up scoring on that drive, though. And in the second half, they got some fourth down stops, got the offensive ball in good field position, and allowed them to go down the field and get it going. And really, aside from, Baylor's first scoring drive of the game where they put together a touchdown drive after the Imani Bailey fumble, and there were some converted third downs and some other frustrating things that happened. Aside from that, I thought the defense played really solidly. Now, it's going to be a much bigger test against Oklahoma. Curious thing about Oklahoma, though, Dylan Gabriel went out with what appeared to be a concussion. They listed it as a head injury on the injury report against BYU on the road. And so Jackson Arnold had to play the second half of that football game. Oklahoma ends up escaping. They win 24-17. Now, Jackson Arnold's super talented, 5-star quarterback, true freshman. But, he was the man coming out of high school, a huge key piece that Brett Venables landed almost immediately when he made it to campus. And so this is this is a talented dude, right? But still a young QB who would be making his first career start against the Frogs, who ends up shaking out that way. Now, Venables said that they're hopeful that Gabriel can play. They think he can get back pretty quick. Concussion protocol is tricky, and I don't know all the steps that has to be taken. On a short week, it seems like that would be a tough thing to do to get back and be cleared to play on Friday. But we'll see what happens. And I think this is a game where if you have a young QB back there, I hope Joe Gillespie, even though it's against his nature, I hope he's aggressive. I hope he's getting after Jackson Arnold, trying to heat him up, trying to force bad decisions, because that's one way to really get somebody off their game. We saw it. These are two different defenses, but K-State against TCU, they completely changed the timing and just obliterated a lot of that quick passing game stuff by just constantly putting pressure in the face of Josh Hoover. And so hopefully the Frogs can do that if it does end up being Arnold. But either way, you want to get pressure on Dylan Gabriel as well if he does end up being the starter. And there were things in that football game that, listen, this team has issues that are just not going to get solved before the end of the season. Like the red zone offense is bad. And, the main reason is their O-line's not very good. I still take issue with some of Kendall Brow's play calls. And that was the other thing I was going to say about the Hoover situation, the quarterback situation. So much of this, too, hinges on what do you decide to do there? If you're going to keep Kendall around, then it makes a ton of sense to keep Josh. And I think regardless it does. But you bring in a new coordinator, and that, sets a lot of wheels in motion. I'm not like if they let Kendall Browse go, I'd be totally okay with that. But I just mean that's another factor in the equation of figuring this out and who you move forward with at that key position. And so he had he called a reverse play with Savion Williams on a 4th and 1 that didn't work. The fumble, I think it was Brandon Coleman. Unfortunately, he just got blown up at the guard position, and Imani ran right into him and fumbled the ball. But that was on a 1st and goal play. And that 4th and 1 call, I will say, I thought watching it live, I thought Savion might have had a chance to get the first down if he just got north and south, especially with as physical as he is running the football when he does get downhill. In my mind, I was just like, get up the field. He just kept going sideline to sideline, trying to get the edge, trying to find an opening, and he ends up getting strung out all the way to the other side of the field and gets tackled before getting that first down. But things like that, he's called things like that all year, and I think part of it is, it's an issue that's followed him from stop to stop because and Jeff Lebby, who they'll be working against on the other side of the ball this week too, the Oklahoma offense coordinator, he's also been accused of this. They just get too cute in the red zone. But part of that too is they don't think they can run between the guard and tackle. And for the most part, they've been right. In those obvious rushing situations, they haven't been able to run the football. And even the big runs that Imani had this weekend, one of them, he cuts in between 2 defenders and takes it to the house. Another one, he bounced off 4 or 5 tackles. There's just no easy yards in the run game right now. And it's super frustrating to watch. And it's been a problem all year long. TCU added a commit to their 2024 class, a JUCO player, Caden McMahon from Tyler Junior College. He played his high school ball at Liberty Hill. He's 6'3", 225 pounds, not currently ranked on 247 Sports in their database. He had an official visit over the weekend for that Baylor game and said he loved everything about it. And Fort Worth felt like home for me. He told that to Mike Roach of 247 Sports. And he grew up, in the DFW area playing at Liberty Hill and was a big TCU fan. He had 60 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 3 interceptions in his senior season at Liberty Hill and led them to the state championship game where they ultimately fell against South Oak Cliff. Has only played 1 year at TJC. So, again, kind of a high upside guy, more of a project guy. That's been their strategy this cycle. I don't know if that's out of necessity. I'm not sure how much that's just kind of the direction they were forced to go or wanted to go. But Cade McMahon, linebacker from Tyler Junior College, another instance where they're just kind of trusting the scouting department. And excited for him. It's really cool that he dreamed of being at TCU. Liberty Hill is one of the most storied programs in the state of Texas. They're really good year after year on the offensive side of the ball. They run a triple option attack that's really deadly. So they keep adding talent, and they rank 34th in the 247 rankings, and so they've filled out this class with a lot of players that they think are just going to get it done and maybe are undervalued. And we'll see what those evaluations look like in a few years. But Cade McMahon, the linebacker from Tyler Junior College, originally from Liberty Hill, Caden McMahon, he ends up at TCU, and excited that he's going to be a Frog and looking forward to what he does moving forward. When we come back, Gary Patterson told Matt Mosley he wants to get back into coaching. What does that mean? We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. PrizePicks, daily fantasy games, PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll match your first deposit up to $100. I'm watching Monday Night Football right now, Eagles and Chiefs. And PrizePicks has this really cool deal. It's part of their specials tab. If you want to make some combo projections, because we've got NBA and NFL going on at the same time right now. We got some overlap. So if you want to make some projections on combined number of three-pointers by LeBron James and receptions by Travis Kelce in a given game, you can do that. You can mix and match. It only takes about 60 seconds to 90 seconds to get some of these bets going. It's just simple over-unders on stat totals. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. If you go there, they'll match your first deposit up to $100. So that's just free money that you can play with. You can get to know the app, get to know the systems, get a feel for what you're doing. PrizePicks, the best daily fantasy app out there. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. So Matt Mosley, who works at ESPN Central Texas, I used to do a radio show with him 5 days a week before I left the radio industry and got into podcasting and a day job in mortgages, a tale as old as time. But Matt, funny enough, like Matt, even though he's a diehard Baylor guy and multiple generations in his family went to BU, he's become really good friends with Gary Patterson. Over the years, they've just developed a friendship. And so he had Gary on last week. And a few of you asked me about this. I'm going to do an entire segment on it tomorrow, but I wanted to just kind of set the table for it in our last segment today. He had Gary on, and his plan initially, he told me this. He said, my plan was I was going to have Gary on. I was going to talk about, the Baylor-TC rivalry, the new name for the game, the trophy, memories, right, all that stuff. And if you listen to the interview, and he said this, Matt said this to me. He was like, I found out pretty quick Gary didn't want to talk about that. And if you listen to the interview, that's pretty obvious. Gary wasn't like rude about it or mean or anything, but Matt was asking him about, the Blue Bonnet Battle name and some of his favorite memories from those games, those battles with Baylor. And Gary was just giving really short answers. Like he didn't really budge on any of it or bite on any of it. But then later in the interview, Matt kind of pivots and starts talking about, what he's up to these days, what he wants to do. And Gary sort of unprompted, says that he wants to get back into coaching, says he feels like he's got some years left in him. And I'm not shocked by that. But, I mean, he's been out of the game for 2 years. I think this is a pretty direct attempt, and I'm sure he's doing this in the back channels as well. But just to let people know, hey, the tenure at Texas was not me riding off into the sunset. It wasn't me saying goodbye. I wanted to take some time to evaluate, to decompress, to learn some things. And now I'm ready to jump at this again and try it. And so I'm fascinated by where he might land. I think, I asked Matt, I was like, do you feel like you want to be a DC? Because my first thought was he could be a defensive coordinator at about any Power 5 school in the nation. And I think people would pay handsomely for his services. And he said, no, it sounds like he wants to be a head coach. So we'll see what happens. Jerry Kill at New Mexico State, he's got the Aggies just cooking. They've won 9 games this year. They just beat Auburn on the road and won that game handily, right? And I could see Gary at a Group of 5 school. I think that would make a ton of sense. I think there'll be some Power 5 interests as well. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Also, tomorrow night, TCU basketball takes on Alcorn State as the men's basketball team continues to just build that schedule, get that non-conference schedule going for this upcoming conference slate that'll be starting in January. And they're coming off a win on Friday night and looking to continue that, to stay undefeated and just build on what's been exciting start to the season. So we'll have coverage of that and more. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.